Blood is thicker than water, but it doesn't pay for an $80,000 BMW. My parents literally broke into my home safe, forged my signature, and handed my dream car to my deadbeat brother as a gift. They thought I'd just roll over. Instead, I let the highway patrol handle him. In my family, there were always two very distinct sets of rules. One for me, and one for my younger brother Braden. If I got a B on a high school math test, my parents, Richard and Susan, would sit me down for a stern lecture about my future and the importance of a strong work ethic. If Braden failed a class, it was the teacher's fault for not recognizing his unique learning style. When I turned 18, I was handed a set of luggage and a bill for my own cell phone plan. When Braden turned 18, he was given a brand new Honda Civic, which he promptly wrapped around a telephone pole 3 months later while texting his girlfriend. Their response: they bought him another one. I learned early on that if I wanted anything in this life, I was going to have to bleed for it. So, I did. I moved to Austin, Texas, threw myself into the grueling world of enterprise software sales, and spent my 20s living out of a suitcase. I worked 80-hour weeks, endured the soul-crushing rejection of cold calling, and slowly clawed my way up the corporate ladder. By the time I was 28, I was a senior account executive pulling in a multi-six-figure income. Braden, on the other hand, was 24, living in my parents' fully furnished basement, and on his third attempt at a gap year to focus on his burgeoning career as a Twitch streamer. After closing the biggest deal of my career, a massive software deployment for a national logistics firm, I decided it was finally time to reward myself. I had been driving the same beat-up Toyota Camry since college. The air conditioning was more of a suggestion, and the transmission shuddered every time I hit 50 miles per hour. I had saved meticulously, living well below my means for years. I didn't want a lease. I wanted to own my reward outright. I walked into the dealership and met with Todd, a veteran salesman who didn't dismiss me just because I was a young woman walking onto a luxury lot alone. I knew exactly what I wanted: a custom-ordered 2024 BMW M4 Competition X-Drive, Isle of Man green metallic paint, Silverstone leather interior, carbon fiber trim, and a twin-turbo inline-six engine that sounded like a symphony of pure aggression. The total came to just over $80,000. I wrote a cashier's check, shook Todd's hand, and drove off the lot feeling an indescribable sense of pride. I had the clear title mailed directly to my house a few weeks later, securing it in a small, locked, fireproof safe in my home office, along with my passport and the car's spare key fob. The mistake I made was driving it to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I hadn't intended to flaunt it, but you can't exactly hide a bright green, aggressively styled sports car in a suburban driveway. When I walked through the front door, the atmosphere was already thick with tension. Braden was peering out the living room window, his face contorted into a mix of awe and bitter jealousy. "Is that yours?" he demanded, not even offering a hello. "Just picked it up on Friday," I said, unable to hide my smile. My mother, Susan, walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She glanced out the window and then back at me, her lips pursed tightly. "There was no congratulations, Willow, or 'We're so proud of how hard you've worked.' Instead," she sighed. "It's very flashy, isn't it? Seems like a desperate cry for attention." My dad, Richard, chimed in from his recliner. "Insurance on a thing like that must be a nightmare. Seems like an incredibly irresponsible financial decision, Willow, especially in this economy." "I paid cash, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice level. "And I can easily afford the insurance. It's a reward for the massive contract I just signed." Braden scoffed, flopping onto the sofa. "Must be nice. Meanwhile, my laptop keeps overheating and ruining my streams, and I can't even get a loan for a new one because my credit is shot. But sure, go off with your $80,000 toy." "Maybe," my mother said softly, looking pointedly at me. "If you have that kind of disposable income, you could help your brother get his business off the ground. Family should take care of family." I felt the familiar hot prickle of anger in my chest, but I pushed it down. My money is my money, Mum. Braden needs to get a real job. The rest of the dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. I left early, the roar of the M4's engine a comforting sound as I put miles between myself and their toxic favoritism. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they would just harbour their quiet resentment. As usual, I grossly underestimated them. A month later, my company sent me to Seattle for a mandatory 2-week leadership summit. It was an important trip, one that required my absolute focus. Because I'd be gone for so long, I needed someone to check in on my golden retriever, Buster, and water my plants. Normally, I would hire a sitter, but my usual girl, Hannah, had moved back to college. Reluctantly, I asked my parents. They lived only 20 minutes away, and despite our differences, my dad had always had a soft spot for Buster. I gave my mother a spare key to my house, explicitly telling her to only use it to feed the dog and let him out into the backyard twice a day. "Don't worry about a thing, sweetie," Susan had said on the phone, her tone surprisingly sugary. "We'll take perfectly good care of everything." I parked the BMW in my attached garage, locked the doors, grabbed my suitcase, and took an Uber to the airport. The first 3 days in Seattle went smoothly. I was giving presentations, networking with regional directors, and falling into the grueling rhythm of corporate conferences. On Thursday afternoon, I was sitting in the middle of a crowded hotel ballroom, listening to a keynote speaker drone on about synergy and market saturation. My phone, resting face up on the table next to my notebook, suddenly lit up. It was a push notification from the My BMW app. Engine started. I frowned, staring at the screen. Sometimes the app glitched, sending delayed notifications. I tapped the screen to dismiss it, but a second later, another notification popped up. Vehicle in motion. My blood ran cold. I quickly opened the app and navigated to the vehicle locator. A little blue dot, representing my $80,000 car, was moving steadily down my street in Austin, turning onto the main artery that led toward Interstate 35. Panic seized my chest. Was my house being robbed? Did someone break into the garage? I had both of my daily keys with me in Seattle. Wait. No. The spare key fob. It was locked inside the Sentry fireproof safe in my home office, exactly where I left it. I slipped out of my chair, ignoring the annoyed glances from my colleagues, and practically sprinted out of the ballroom into the quiet, carpeted hallway. My hands were shaking as I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the third ring. "Hello, Willow. How is Seattle?" "Mom, is someone at my house?" I demanded, skipping any pleasantries. My car app just notified me that my BMW is being driven. There was a heavy, unnatural pause on the other end of the line. When Susan finally spoke, her voice was irritatingly calm, possessing that condescending tone she always used when she was about to justify something terrible. "Oh, yes. Don't panic, sweetie. Your car is perfectly safe." "What do you mean it's safe?" "Who is driving my car, Mum?" "Braden is," she said smoothly. He had a very important meeting across town for a potential sponsorship, and his old car has been making that rattling noise again. Your father and I thought it would make a good impression if he pulled up in something nice. Dress for the job you want, you know? I literally stopped breathing for a second. The audacity was so staggering I couldn't process it. "You let Braden take my car? Without asking me?" "Mum, he's a terrible driver. He totaled 2 cars before he was 21. And how did he even start it? The spare key is locked in my safe." "Well," Susan hesitated, her tone slipping slightly. "Your father is very handy with tools. It only took him a few minutes to pop that little box open. Honestly. Willow, keeping a safe in the house is just paranoid. You broke into my safe?" I was shouting now, pacing the hotel hallway. "That is a felony! You broke into my safe and stole my car." "Stop being so dramatic," she snapped, the sweet facade vanishing. "We didn't steal anything. Your family. We are a family. Willow, you have more money than you know what to do with, and your brother is struggling. We decided it was time to level the playing field." "Level the playing field? What does that even mean?" "We're keeping it, Willow. The words hung in the air, cold and absolute. "We are giving the car to Braden," Susan stated, her voice hardening with self-righteous authority. "Consider it an early birthday present from you to him. You can buy yourself another one of those little toys when you get back. Braden needs this win." I let out a harsh, breathless laugh. "You can't just give away my car. That's not how the world works, Mom. The title is in my name. The registration is in my name. If he gets pulled over, he's driving a stolen vehicle." "Actually," Susan said, a sickeningly smug smile evident in her voice, "that's not entirely true." A cold dread washed over me. "What did you do?" "When your father opened the safe to get the key, we saw the title in there. You hadn't even filed it away properly. So, I just did a little paperwork. I filled out the buyer section for Braden, and I signed your name on the seller line. We took it down to the county tax office this morning before he left. They processed the title transfer without a hitch. It's Braden's car now. Legally." The silence in the hallway was deafening. I leaned against the patterned wallpaper, my knees suddenly weak. My own parents. They hadn't just trespassed. They hadn't just committed breaking and entering. They had committed grand theft auto and felony forgery, and they did it all with a smile, convinced they were enacting some twisted form of cosmic justice for their golden child. "You forged my signature on a legal government document," I whispered, the reality of the situation fully settling in. "It's just a signature, Willow. Don't make a federal case out of it. Honestly, you should be happy to help your brother. I don't want to hear another word about this. Have a good time in Seattle." Click. She hung up on me. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the darkened screen of my phone. I opened the My BMW app again. Braden was currently doing 95 miles per hour on I-35 South, heading toward San Antonio. He was pushing my brand new, rear-wheel biased, 503 horsepower machine to its limits on a crowded interstate. A wave of white-hot, blinding fury washed away the shock. They thought I would just take it. They thought the ingrained childhood conditioning of keeping the peace would force me to eat an $80,000 loss just so Braden could have a shiny new toy. They thought I was still the little girl who would quietly accept the scraps while Braden got the feast. They were wrong. I didn't call her back. I didn't text my father to argue. I didn't reach out to Braden to beg him to turn around. Instead, I sat down on a velvet bench in the hallway, opened my laptop, and pulled up the contact number for the Texas Department of Public Safety. I bypassed the local city police. Braden was already out of Austin's jurisdiction anyway. I needed the state troopers. I needed the highway patrol. I dialed the number. A woman answered after 2 rings. "Texas DPS. Dispatcher Higgins. How can I help you?" "Hi," I said, my voice shockingly steady, ice cold and clear. "I need to report a stolen vehicle. A 2024 BMW M4. And I have the live GPS coordinates of the thief right now." Dispatcher Higgins had the crisp, no-nonsense tone of someone who dealt with highway chaos every single day. "Ma'am, I need the license plate, the VIN if you have it, and your current location." I sat on the velvet bench in the Seattle hotel hallway, my fingers flying across my laptop keyboard as I pulled up my digital files. "I'm currently in Seattle, Washington, on a business trip. My car was securely parked in my locked garage in Austin. The license plate is Texas, Charlie Bravo 9er. I rattled off the plate and the VIN from my insurance app. "Copy that. You said you have live tracking?" "Yes," I replied, staring at the My BMW app on my phone. "It's an integrated factory system. He's currently on Interstate 35 South, just past San Marcos." Dispatcher Higgins. "He's doing 105 miles per hour. I heard the rapid clacking of her keyboard. "I'm dispatching units in Comal County to intercept." "Who is the driver, ma'am?" I swallowed hard. Saying it out loud made the betrayal violently real. "His name is Braden. He's my brother. But there is a massive complication you need to warn your troopers about. My mother broke into my home safe this morning, stole the vehicle's title, forged my signature, and illegally transferred it to him at the county tax office. He is likely carrying a fraudulent title with his name on it. Higgins paused for a fraction of a second. Understood. That elevates this significantly. Do you have proof of original ownership? I have the dealership bill of sale, the wire transfer receipt from my bank, and my stamped flight itinerary proving I was in Washington state when the title was allegedly signed in Texas. I can email all of it to you right now. Send it to the address I'm texting you, she instructed. Stay on the line. I'm coordinating with Trooper Wyatt in Sector 4. He's about 5 miles ahead of the vehicle's current location. For the next 10 minutes, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I watched the little blue dot on my screen weave through digital traffic. The telemetry data was damning, hard braking, rapid acceleration, the G-force indicators lighting up as Braden drove my precision-engineered machine like it was a stolen golf cart. Every spike in RPM felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was destroying the break-in period of the engine. Trooper Wyatt has a visual, Higgins announced suddenly. Vehicle is matching the description. Isle of Man Green BMW M4. Radar clocks him at 112 miles per hour in a 70 zone. Trooper is initiating the traffic stop. On my screen, the vehicle's speed plummeted. 112, 80, 45, 0. The blue dot pulled to the digital shoulder just outside of New Braunfels. They're stopped, I whispered. Hold the line, Willow, Higgins said. I waited. The silence stretching through the phone was agonizing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I could only imagine the scene playing out on the side of that sun-baked Texas highway. Braden, arrogant and completely oblivious to the gravity of the real world, probably thought he was just getting a speeding ticket. He probably rolled down the window with that smug, entitled smirk he used whenever our parents bailed him out of trouble. Then, Higgins came back on the line. Willow, I'm transferring you directly to Trooper Wyatt at the scene. He needs to confirm a few details. A click, a burst of radio static, and then a deep, resonant voice. This is Trooper Wyatt, Texas Highway Patrol. Am I speaking with the registered owner of this BMW? Yes, sir. This is Willow. Ma'am, I have a young man in custody here who is incredibly agitated. He presented a newly printed vehicle title showing him as the owner. But the ink is barely dry, and dispatch informed me of your forgery report. I need to verbally confirm. Did you authorize the transfer or use of this vehicle? Before I could answer, I heard a familiar, panicked screech in the background. Tell him, Willow! Tell him Mom gave it to me. You're ruining my life. I'm supposed to be at a brand deal in San Antonio. Tell him to take these cuffs off. My brother was screaming. The bravado was entirely gone, replaced by the hysterical terror of a pampered child who had finally slammed headfirst into a boundary his parents couldn't erase. Trooper Wyatt, I said, my voice echoing off the hotel walls. I did not authorize the transfer. I did not authorize him to drive it. The signature on that title is a forgery committed by my mother, Susan, this morning. I want to press full charges for grand theft auto. Understood, Trooper Wyatt replied calmly, completely unbothered by Braden's screaming. The vehicle is being impounded as evidence of a felony. The suspect is being transported to the Comal County Jail. We will be in touch regarding the forgery investigation. Have a safe trip back from Seattle, ma'am. The call ended. I leaned my head back against the wall and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 28 years. The first domino had fallen. The fallout didn't begin immediately. It took exactly 3 hours for the reality of the situation to reach my parents' suburban bubble. I was back in the conference room, half listening to a panel discussion, when my phone began vibrating intensely. It was my mother. I hit ignore. She called again. Ignore. On the 5th consecutive call, I stepped out into the hallway and answered. Where is he? Susan shrieked into the receiver. She was crying so hard she was hyperventilating. Willow, answer me right now. Braden called your father from a jail phone. He said he was arrested on the highway. He said they pulled guns on him. They follow standard felony stop procedures for stolen vehicles. Mom, I said flatly. I doubt they pulled guns, but they certainly put him in handcuffs. Stolen, she gasped, the word tearing from her throat. I told you we transferred the title. I told you it was his. How could you do this to your own flesh and blood? You called the police on your brother over a stupid car. I didn't do this to him, Mom. You did. You literally manufactured a felony and handed it to him along with the keys. You need to call them back right now, she demanded, her voice shifting from hysterical to vicious. You call the police, and you tell them there was a misunderstanding. You tell them you gave us permission to sign the title for you. If you don't fix this, he's going to have a permanent record. His streaming career will be over. No. The single syllable hung between us, heavy and final. What do you mean, no? Susan whispered. I mean, no. I'm not lying to the Texas Highway Patrol. I'm not perjuring myself to save him from the consequences of your actions. Then, my father, Richard, got on the line. I could hear the heavy, thudding sound of him pacing their kitchen floor. Willow, be reasonable, he barked, trying to assert his usual dominant authority. This has gone far enough. You've taught him a lesson, okay? You made your point. Now call the precinct and drop the charges. We will buy you a new safe. We will even pay for the impound fees. Just get your brother out of a cage. You don't understand, Dad. It's not just about Braden stealing the car anymore. The state is taking this over. What are you talking about? The title? I said, letting the icy reality of the situation coat every word. When you broke into my safe, took a legal government document, filled it out, forged my signature, and handed it to a state clerk at the county tax office, you committed a felony. Actually, you committed several: burglary, forgery of a government instrument, and title fraud. The silence on the line was absolute. I could almost hear the gears grinding in my father's head as the horrific truth dawned on him. They hadn't just grounded me. They hadn't just given my favorite toy to my brother. They had created a highly documented paper trail of a major financial crime. You wouldn't tell them about that, Richard stammered, his booming voice suddenly sounding very small and very old. Willow, we're your parents. I already did, Dad. I had to. It was the only way to explain why a 24-year-old with no job was driving a brand new $80,000 car with a title freshly printed 2 hours prior. The DPS already has my digital bill of sale and proof that I am in Seattle. They know the signature in Austin is a fake. Oh my God, Susan moaned in the background. It was a visceral, terrifying sound of a woman realizing her entire world was collapsing. Richard, the cameras. There were cameras at the tax office. Do not say another word. My father hissed at her, sudden panic lacing his tone. He came back to the phone. Willow, you are destroying this family. Over money. Over a piece of metal. No, I corrected him, stepping into the hotel elevator to head up to my room. I bought the piece of metal with money I earned. You destroyed the family the moment you took a crowbar to my safe. You wanted to level the playing field. Right? Well, congratulations. You're all playing the same game now. I hung up, blocked their numbers for the remainder of my trip, and let the justice system do exactly what it was designed to do. The karma they had invited into their lives was about to hit them harder than they could ever imagine. The remainder of my time in Seattle was a grueling exercise in psychological endurance. By day, I forced myself to be the sharp, relentless account executive, smiling through boardroom presentations and networking lunches as if my entire family dynamic hadn't just imploded. By night, I was barricaded in my hotel room, on the phone with Detective Miller from the Travis County Financial Crimes Unit, feeding him a mountain of digital documentation. I sent him my bank statements, the dealership bill of sale, my time-stamped flight itinerary, and the GPS telemetry data from the My BMW app. When my return flight finally touched down in Austin, I bypassed my empty house entirely. I took a rideshare straight to the Comal County impound lot, situated on a dusty frontage road baking under the relentless Texas sun. Walking into that barbed wire enclosure felt like visiting a crime scene. The impound office smelled of stale coffee, cigarette smoke, and misery. After signing a stack of release forms and paying a non-refundable $450 impound fee out of my own pocket, a receipt I carefully folded into my wallet for the inevitable restitution claim, the attendant led me out, into the gravel yard. Seeing my stunning, custom-ordered M4 sandwiched between a rusted-out pickup truck and a crumpled sedan made my stomach twist into hard, painful knots. The pristine Isle of Man green paint was coated in a thick layer of chalky highway dust when I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. The lingering, suffocating stench of Braden's cheap, overpowering body spray assaulted my senses. The carbon fiber center console was sticky with spilled energy drink, and fast food wrappers littered the passenger floorboard. He hadn't even possessed the car for 12 hours, and he had already treated my $80,000 achievement like a rented dumpster. I drove it straight to a premium detailer, then went home. My sanctuary no longer felt safe. Within 2 hours of returning, I had a locksmith completely rekey every door in my house. I upgraded my existing home security system, adding 3 high-definition exterior cameras and motion sensors. I purchased a heavy-duty, steel-reinforced safe, bolted it directly into the concrete foundation of my home office, and locked the spare key inside. I braced myself for the incoming assault. I fully expected my parents to show up on my porch, banging on the heavy oak door, demanding that I drop the charges or fix the mess they created. I expected a barrage of flying monkeys, aunts, uncles, and family friends, manipulated by my mother's inevitable tearful narrative of her cruel, heartless daughter. But for 14 days, the silence was absolute. It was an eerie, suffocating quiet. It was the low-pressure calm that immediately precedes a catastrophic hurricane. The hammer didn't just fall on my family, it dropped from orbit, completely obliterating the facade they had spent decades building. The twist, the horrifying detail that officially mutated this situation from a bitter familial dispute into a high-stakes, multi-agency criminal indictment was uncovered by Detective Miller during his second week of investigation. My parents hadn't just forged my signature on a legal government document simply to hand Braden the keys to a flashy car. Giving him the vehicle was only phase 1 of a deeply malicious, premeditated financial scheme. Because I had paid for the BMW in full with a cashier's check, the title was classified as clean and clear. There were no bank liens, no financing companies involved, and no red tape. It was an unencumbered asset worth over $80,000. Detective Miller called me on a Tuesday afternoon to explain the depths of their betrayal. Roughly an hour after my mother, Susan, successfully presented the forged title transfer at the county tax office, she and my father didn't drive home. Instead, they took Braden and the freshly printed, fraudulent title straight to a notoriously predatory, high-interest title loan company operating out of a strip mall on the outskirts of Austin. Using my stolen car and the fake title as collateral, my parents secured a massive $35,000 cash loan. They walked out of that strip mall with a duffel bag full of cash. And why did they need such an exorbitant amount of liquid capital so quickly? The detective had pulled their financial records. It turned out that Braden's struggling streamer persona was hiding a massive, suffocating mountain of debt. He had secretly opened multiple high-limit credit cards under my father's name, maxing them out on terrible cryptocurrency investments, expensive gaming equipment, and lavish gifts for internet moderators he was trying to impress. The credit card companies were threatening to sue my father. My parents were drowning in Braden's financial ruin. Instead of holding their precious golden child accountable or filing for bankruptcy, they decided to sacrifice my hard work to save him. They literally stole my car to use it as a pawn in their desperate, illegal shell game. That revelation upgraded their legal jeopardy from serious to catastrophic. It was no longer just a local matter of forgery and grand theft auto. By intentionally defrauding a registered commercial lending institution using falsified government instruments across county lines, they had triggered severe felony charges of theft by deception, commercial fraud, and conspiracy. The subsequent arrest was not a quiet, dignified affair arranged through an attorney. It was a spectacular, Public takedown. It happened on a bright, sunny Thursday morning. My parents lived in a highly affluent, aggressively manicured subdivision where image was everything. My mother was the former president of the Homeowners Association, a woman who built her entire social standing on judging the perceived flaws of her neighbors. According to Detective Miller, 3 unmarked law enforcement vehicles and 2 fully marked police cruisers rolled to a stop in front of their pristine 2-story brick home just as the neighborhood was waking up. Neighbors who were out walking their labradoodles, watering their impeccable lawns, or getting into their SUVs for the morning school run all stopped dead in their tracks. They watched in stunned, gossiping silence as my father, Richard, wearing his expensive golf polo and khakis, was firmly escorted out of his own front door in heavy steel handcuffs. My mother followed seconds later. Susan was not wearing her usual tailored outfits or perfect makeup. She was in a mismatched terrycloth bathrobe, weeping hysterically and screaming at the officers that there had been a terrible misunderstanding. They were placed in the back of separate cruisers in broad daylight, their pristine suburban reputation instantly and permanently reduced to ash. Braden wasn't at the house during the raid. He was already out on a bondsman's bail from his initial highway arrest, hiding out in a dingy apartment belonging to a friend from high school because he was too terrified to face the escalating fallout. But the district attorney wasn't letting him slip away. His charges were severely upgraded later that afternoon. He was hit with possession of stolen property over $30,000, conspiracy to commit commercial fraud, and obstruction of justice for lying to Trooper Wyatt on the highway. When the news of their coordinated arrests finally hit the local county blotter websites and regional crime blogs, Braden's desperate, fragile fantasy of becoming a famous Twitch streamer evaporated overnight. He made the colossal mistake of trying to go live on his channel the following evening, desperately trying to spin a narrative that his insane, toxic sister was trying to ruin his life over a simple misunderstanding. But the internet is a ruthless, undefeated machine. Within 10 minutes of him going live, viewers began dropping direct links to the Comal County public arrest records and his unedited mugshot in the chat. The chat turned on him with terrifying speed. His few hundred loyal viewers realized that their favorite streamer, who constantly bragged about his relentless grind, his supposed wealth, and his brand new BMW, was actually an unemployed fraud who conspired with his parents to financially ruin his own sister. He was doxxed relentlessly. Viewers mocked him, clipped his pathetic, tearful breakdown on stream, and posted it across every major social media platform. The humiliation was so absolute and overwhelming that Braden was forced to permanently delete his Twitch channel, his Instagram, and his Twitter just to escape the relentless digital assault. 3 weeks later, I received a thick manila envelope at my office. It contained a formal letter from a high-priced criminal defense attorney representing my parents. The sheer audacity contained within those pages was almost poetic in its delusion. They were begging me to formally request the district attorney to drop the charges. They wanted me to sign an affidavit of non-prosecution, claiming that the entire ordeal was just a family dispute that got out of hand. But the most staggering part of the letter was the final paragraph. They subtly suggested that, given my high income, I should consider paying their $50,000 legal retainer because family must stick together during hardships. They were facing anywhere from 5 to 20 years in a Texas state penitentiary, and they still believed, deep down in their twisted, entitled souls, that I owed them my paycheck. I took a red pen, wrote a single sentence across the bottom of the attorney's expensive letterhead, and mailed it back to his office. I strongly suggest you advise your clients to negotiate a plea deal before trial. Because of the overwhelming, irrefutable mountain of evidence, the high-definition security footage from the county tax office showing Susan forging the document, the signature analysis proving the forgery, the title loan contracts bearing Richard's signature, and my rock-solid, time-stamped alibi in Seattle, they had absolutely zero viable defense. They tried to float a ridiculous claim to the DA that I had given them verbal permission to use the car for a loan, but the prosecutor practically laughed them out of the conference room. Terrified of spending their golden years in a maximum security prison, my parents were ultimately forced to accept a brutal, life-altering plea agreement. They narrowly avoided actual prison time, but they were sentenced to 5 years of intense, highly restrictive felony probation. But the real, devastating karma struck their finances. As part of the plea, they were legally ordered by a judge to pay full restitution to the title loan company, cover every single one of my impound and legal fees, and pay massive state fines for the fraud. Because they had lived wildly beyond their means for decades to coddle Braden and maintain their fake suburban image, they didn't have the liquid cash to cover the court orders. The bank quickly foreclosed on the beautiful, 5-bedroom house they had lived in for 25 years. They were forced to prematurely liquidate Richard's entire retirement 401k, absorbing massive early withdrawal tax penalties, just to satisfy the court and keep themselves out of a jail cell. They lost everything. Their home, their savings, their reputation, and their standing in the community. They were forced to move into a cramped, poorly maintained 2-bedroom apartment in a rough neighborhood on the far east side of the city. And Braden, completely broke, stripped of his online identity, and utterly unemployable with a pending felony fraud charge hovering over his head, had no choice but to move into the tiny second bedroom with them. They were finally trapped together in the very reality they had created. I never spoke to a single one of them ever again. I blocked their phone numbers, filtered their desperate, tearful emails directly into my trash folder, and continued building the life I had earned. Last weekend, I took my golden retriever, Buster, for a long drive out through the winding, scenic roads of the Texas hill country. The windows were rolled down, the twin-turbo engine was humming flawlessly beneath me, and the golden hour sun was gleaming brilliantly off the Isle of Man green paint. I felt the cool breeze on my face and realized I had earned every single inch of my peace. I learned the hardest way possible that sometimes the only way to deal with deeply toxic family members is to step entirely out of their way and let them destroy themselves with their own entitlement.